The data breach investigations report started as a quest for information, and of course that would be a fantastic insight into how incidents happen, what happens afterwards, and how victims respond. So now we have 10 years of data. It's been pretty remarkable, some of the changes that have happened over that period of time.
Verizon was really the first one who ever came out with a report like this at all, and still today we're considered the #1 report of this type for sharing this information, consolidating this information, and most importantly, analyzing it in a way that's meaningful for our customers. This year we had over 50 contributing organizations, so you could see that there's lots of people and entities out there that want to share their information with us to help bolster the underlying data. We saw 63,000 incidents contributed to the report, while 1,300 of those were confirmed data breaches, which is over double what we saw last year.
So imagine the problem, if you will. You essentially have information on 100,000 security incidents. How do you find what you should focus on first? And so what we really needed to do was simplify all of the noise down to what was really signal. And so you'll notice these 9 incident patterns in the DBIR that comprise 92% of all of those 100,000 incidents that we've studied over the last 10 years.
Once we started consolidating the data, we realized that the majority of what we were seeing specifically resided into these 9 areas. And the threats that we identified in the DBIR included errors, crimeware and malware, insider and privilege misuse, lost and stolen assets or theft loss, web application attacks, denial of service attacks, cyber espionage, point-of-sale intrusion, and payment card skimmers. One of the things we expected to see in the data this year, due to all the hype we saw in the media with the retail breaches that were happening, that point-of-sale must have been the #1 attack vector for the bad guys. But what we're actually seeing is that trend is going down, while cyber espionage is going up.
People might be surprised at the amount of increase in the cyber espionage category. It's been kind of under the surface for a long time, but we really focused on it in the last report. One of the things we saw in this year is an increase in what we'll call strategic web compromises or watering hole attacks, where a legitimate website that seems to be a central hub for a certain industry, they'll actually put malware in those sites, expecting businesses to come to that site and become infected. And that's how the attack starts, rather than just a traditional spear phishing email, which is what we saw in last year's report.
So other than cyber espionage, one of the attacks that are most prevalent out there are web-based application attacks. And what that means is somebody going out and using your credentials in an illegal way to break into an application to steal something, whether it's your money, whether it's your credit card data, whether it's your personal information.
Kind of makes sense, right? If you're an organization, you're moving more and more assets online, you're distributing your internet presence and infrastructure, and so the bad guys are going to attack you at those points. And in that pattern, we essentially see 2 different types of attacks. You see a lot of brute force activity against logins. So in other words, try a different password a ton of times until you get access. And that, of course, is done against banks and against information providers that have an online account activity, that kind of thing. And then you also see the use of stolen credentials. Another pattern that I think people are going to wonder about is the miscellaneous errors, which by name is miscellaneous. It covers things like emails sent to the wrong person because you fat-fingered someone's address. Also posting information that should go to a private website, an intranet or something of that sort, to a public website. It was used a lot to compromise user accounts and other personal information. And then denial of service is a new pattern for this year. Some people will be surprised to find denial of service attacks in a data breach report. That's something we have not focused on in the past, just because we've been worried about the theft of information, not attacks that take systems down and compromise the availability of assets. So there's, depending on your perspective, there's a lot of different angles there.
One of the things we had expected to see is a widening gap between the bad guys being able to break into a company and the good guys recognizing. What we didn't expect was how quickly that gap is widening and how much longer it's taking for the good guys to recognize that they've actually been compromised. So what we can derive from that is that the customers can't do it on their own. They need to have someone there like Verizon helping them understand the data that's going on in their organization and helping them shore up those resources.
And that's going to be very good for conversations. You're going to be able to springboard right from those most prominent threats into which controls matter most. The DBIR is very much industry-based this year. If you're in the retail or accommodation industry, then you've got very specific problems around point-of-sale intrusions. I mean, that would seem obvious. If you're in the finance, you're going to see a lot of denial-of-service attacks and a lot of web application attacks. When you look at manufacturing, for instance, you get a whole different angle. In government, you start seeing the cyber espionage components where people are trying to steal intellectual property.
So let's take a look at retail, for example. We know that the number one threat facing the retail organizations are POS type of attacks. So certainly how we would tie a Verizon solution to that specific business need is to look at PCI compliance. And does the company have all the controls, all the processes, and all the procedures in place that it needs to protect that data? Another major focus area for financial institutions we see is denial of service attacks. And what a denial of service attack is a massive amount of data coming at either a network or an application and disrupting it from being used. Being up all the time and having availability and sustainability is the single most important thing to a financial institution. So we look at solutions in Verizon such as denial of service mitigation and detection as something that really helps protect those financial institutions. It was not at all a surprise to me that cyber espionage was one of the top vectors for infiltration in the manufacturing industry. IP is the number one thing that a manufacturing industry is trying to protect, and that's what the bad guys are trying to steal.
We've boiled 100,000 security incidents down to 9 patterns, and we show how those 9 patterns relate to industries. But your client is not going to have to even worry about those 9. There's probably 2, 3, maybe 4 things within those 9 that really matter to them. And we hope we have helped you to find those 2, 3, 4 things to have that discussion with them. Our analysis has made this much, much more manageable, and we can have that very targeted, very focused discussion with the client at their level.
One thing we know for certain in looking at the data is that not one solution size is going to fit all industries. Based on the data that we have in the DBIR report, we're absolutely going to be able to take the solutions that Verizon Security has and map it specifically to a vertical industry business need.
Every one of your clients is wondering, what in the world do I do in the face of all of these threats I have to deal with? You're going to have a tool that shows them exactly what they should concentrate on. Very, very specifically, and not only what they should concentrate on, but what they should do about it.
Go out and download the report. Understand what's in the report and how it applies to the vertical that you work within, and understand how the threats that are analyzed within each of the vertical map back to the solutions that we offer at Verizon. And then make sure you reach out to your Verizon security sales specialist for support.